So my name is Bhavesh Mandalia. I am the Chief Airworthiness Officer and Deputy CTO for Lilium. I've been with Lilium for 2.5 years now, and my background includes setting up 3 DOAs from blank sheet, and also 1 POA, in fact, for an organization in Australia. So I've been around the block a few times with the process on DOAs, Subpart J and POA Subpart G, to provide a bit of a comparison in what it's like in a TC holder DOA for a new and innovative product. So first and foremost, a bit about Lilium. So we were founded in 2015. We're based near the Munich area in Bavaria, in Oberpfaffenhofen, which is a special operations airport on the west side of Munich. So we are a startup, but you can see here from the numbers that we are progressing, and we're quite advanced compared to where we were in 2015. We started in 2015 with 4 people, 4 founders, basically from the Technical University of Munich, who came together with a radical idea to create a new and innovative type of aircraft. Definitely been watching Star Trek too much. In fact, if you look at the design of the aircraft. We currently have 800 full-time permanent employees within our in-house capability, comprising of engineering, production, as well as support services. And we have many more contractors as well above this number who are supporting the program. We're a very diverse team with over 58 nationalities, basically. So we're bringing in aerospace experts from Brazil, from the USA, basically from Asia, as well as all parts of Europe, including Turkey as well. So a very diverse team, which is positive, but it also adds complexity because people are used to doing things very differently. We have over a 10,000 square meter facility, which includes our production organization and manufacturing facility also on the side of our engineering office. And this is where we're also planning on doing a lot of our testing, essentially for compliance demonstration as well as development of the product. We are a publicly listed company on NASDAQ as of 2021, and we currently have a 1.4 billion portfolio of funding. We're still classed as a startup, though, because we're going through the process of setting up the DOA and also the POA with the competent authority, the LBR. So a bit about our engineering leadership and organizational structure when it comes to the DO. So you can see there we have a lot of diversity in previous OEMs, predominantly many DOAs. We've got Rolls-Royce, we've got Airbus, we've got Boeing from the European side, Leonardo, Volocopter and Airbus, Marshall Aerospace, and Umbra Group. So we're bringing together quite a lot of experienced people from a DOA background and also from aviation in general. This is positive when it comes to showing competency in the organization, but also negative in the way that, we have a lot of people who are used to doing things very differently. If you look at some of these organizations, they've held DOAs well before even IASA was established. And we've seen the Part 21 regulation change quite a bit over the last 2 decades when IASA has been at the wheel. So you can imagine people are used to doing things differently and want to steer things in one direction. So this is one of the challenges that I wanted to highlight at the beginning. We do have good experience and capability in-house with our people. So regarding our timeline, even though we were set up in 2015, the founders were very eager to apply for a TC and a DOA, DOA being one of the prerequisites of type certification here in Europe. So we applied for the DOA approval together with the TC and also the POA approval back in 2017. Now, we've been working since then essentially to finesse our processes and procedures which are relating to our DOA approval. But in addition to that, we've also seen an evolution in the regulatory landscape when it comes to these types of aircraft. And when you're developing a DOA for a TC holder, it's not simply Part 21 compliance. You've got to consider the product which you're developing as well when it comes to the lower level detail of how are you going to ensure development assurance in accordance with ED 79A, for example, or ARP 4754A? What are you actually going to do to demonstrate that your aircraft meets the certification specifications or special condition, in our case, with SC Retail? So we applied with IASA early on. very quickly, we had the vision of providing a single product that could penetrate the global market, and therefore applying for validation under the BASA with the FAA was also important for us back in 2018. Since then, we've also expanded our validation portfolio to include ANAC in Brazil, and in fact, more recently, just last week, also the CAA in the UK. And this will be progressing as we take advantage of the technical cooperation between IASA and other third countries as well. So to provide a bit of a roadmap of exactly where we've placed our aircraft, which is why we have such an importance in technical cooperation and international cooperation, you can see here that we have products in the US and Brazil. So therefore, we are taking advantage of the BASA in place between the EU and the US and EU and Brazil, and the TIPS, which we have between the IASA and the FAA and the IASA and ANAC. Similarly, we've also recently placed aircraft in China. So we will also be applying basically under the existing BASA between EU and China and the TIP between IASA and CAAC. And then we have other countries, other nations where we have working arrangements where we'll also be capitalizing on those relationships, like Saudi Arabia and also with the UAE. So there's a lot of diversity in where we want to place our aircraft. And therefore, it's important, I think, working to get an EU-registered DOA where we can capitalize on these EU and foreign bilateral aviation safety agreements. We have 750 aircraft at the moment that we've placed, and this number is growing quite rapidly. So it shows the importance of this type of industry as well as the next generation in aircraft and technology. So similarly, with regards to IASA and why IASA and the DOA process is so important. So IASA, I'm quite happy to say, have probably been at the forefront in developing regulations when it comes to the certification and operations of eVTOL aircraft. So you can see here the 5 main areas of focus, including operations, air traffic management, training of flight crew and air crew, infrastructure with things like vertiports, and also initial airworthiness, where there have been updates over the course of the last 5 to 7 years, in fact, where IASA have basically been providing a stable regulatory landscape for this. In a similar vein, FAA, as we've applied also for a validation, have also been developing their regulations, including SFARS for operations, and then also providing special class powered lift certification criteria for us to validate our aircraft against. These are very important in order for us to develop a DOA as well, because without these regulations, it's impossible to develop a DOA for such an innovative product. It goes hand in hand. So this has been quite crucial in our journey towards establishing a DOA. So a bit about the aircraft for those of you who are not familiar with this particular product. So the Lilium jet essentially consists of 30 ducted fans, electric ducted fans. This is a fully electric aircraft. We haven't gone down the route of hybrid. So we have rechargeable lithium-ion batteries, which obviously we touched upon non-rechargeable batteries earlier on in the presentation. But with rechargeable lithium-ion batteries, we have quite a few stringent requirements that we have to follow. Generally, the aircraft has a high top speed of 135 knots, and we are placing the aircraft in the regional air mobility market rather than urban. So with a range of 175 kilometers, we're trying to capitalize on kind of airport to airport or city to city hops instead of urban air mobility within cities. We chose an architecture with ducted fans to try and keep the noise profile of the aircraft down so we can operate in highly densely populated areas without necessary curfews that may be in place with certain noise restrictions. Zero emissions because it's fully electric, and we're also certifying to the highest safety standard in alignment with large transport category airplanes of 10 to the minus 9. So probability of a catastrophic failure being 1 in a billion flight hours, same as what you have for CS25 and also for Category A rotorcraft within CS27 and 29. So this is just to give you a bit of context about the type of product we're setting up the DOA for. Now, externalization of activity under the DOA is important. Certification is a team game. And obviously, as a startup, we cannot do everything ourselves in-house. First of all, we have around 1,000 people. We don't have hundreds of thousands of people where we can develop every single system ourselves. So using the provisions within the design management system where we can outsource activities to partners and subcontractors, it was very important for us to establish relationships with well-known aerospace partners. So you can see here some of the names of the suppliers that we're working with at a DOA level, but then also at a POA level to provide us with what we need to certify our product. So some of the names there you see are providers of TSO, ETSO items. So therefore, we're capitalizing on that approval. Some of them are DOs that also hold POA approval as well. So it's quite important for us to establish these relationships and externalize the activity within the provisions of our design management system. So with regards to our process towards obtaining a DOA, so as mentioned, although we applied in 2017, it was only really in 2020 where we started seeing a bit more conclusion in the regulatory landscape, which kind of provided us with the means of finessing and finalizing our processes. So we provided all of our processes to IASA, and we had our first initial investigation audit basically in May of 2021, initially focusing on the foundations of the DOA. So our structure, how we approve our suppliers, the competencies we have within engineering, within key roles like compliance verification engineers, the independent system monitoring or independent monitoring function, and also interviews of our Form 4 holders, as well as some of our CVEs. Then we moved on essentially a year later. It's fair to say here it's a year later because we had one audit cancelled with many people having COVID on site. So literally, team arrived, team left within 20 minutes after a positive COVID test, and that was moved to April 2022, where we looked more at certification, type investigation, configuration management, also coordination between DOPO, and then how we approve concessions within the organization. Third audit, which was held later that year, was more on compliance demonstration activity, focusing more on MC codes 4 and 5 for lab and ground, and then also looking at manuals, ICA 21.8.6, 21.8.7 in a bit more detail. Then we had our fourth and final audit earlier on this year over the summer, where we expanded on compliance demonstration, looking at MC code 6 and our FTOM for flight testing activity, and then permit to fly, flight conditions, and OSD in more detail. So some of the benefits, I'm sure you're all quite familiar with this being DOAs yourself. Having an agreed handbook and also having an agreed set of processes up front is important when you're working in a TC program. I mean, even though we have the possibility of picking up the phone and speaking to IASA when we want, we don't expect to overburden them. It just slows things down. So process landscape is something we've been working on for the last 3-4 years with them. Having this agreed process landscape also provides us to have more collaborative conversations and have transparency in our certification program. So since the introduction of level of involvement and the risk-based approach, where we have our CDI risk class determination, the system is actually working well for us in our certification program as we've had here. Being a new DO, though, naturally, we're going to have a very high level of involvement. So there'll be nothing below risk class 2 in what we're doing. But having this transparency and an ongoing discussion with the DOA team together with the PCM team is important. In fact, in our investigation, both the DO and PCM team are working together, in fact, because of the intricacies of the product. On the privileges, in future, we will expand our privileges once we've developed a DOA rating, and that could include, for example, the approval of our own flight conditions and permit to fly, together with changes and repairs. Now, it's important to state that our initial DOA, we don't have changes and repairs, although we're working on the procedures in parallel with the aircraft development program to include those as a significant change in the next sort of 6 to 9 months. As mentioned already, externalizing activity is prudent to the success of our kind of product. So therefore, having this provision provides us with the flexibility to bring on partners and subcontractors. And then the international acceptance, once again, as mentioned, is key and critical to what we're doing, being an EU registered DOA in utilizing those bilaterals, working arrangements, and technical cooperation. So some of the challenges, which may be familiar, in fact, some of the challenges were also touched upon by Eva in her presentation earlier on this morning. But I'd like to start with CVEs, Compliance Verification Engineers, which are an important component of the design management system and the design assurance element. So first of all, finding competent CVEs, particularly when you're working with high voltage systems, essentially lithium-ion batteries and those sorts of powertrains, it's impossible, in fact, to find suitably qualified people, or very difficult because they're very few and far between. So essentially, we have to uncover every rock and basically look globally to see if we can find this capability. Here, we've had to reach into the automotive industry, but then there's also the additional burden of cost in training them to work with aerospace processes, to work with the DOA system and various items like that. Availability, once again, linked to finding these competencies. eVTOL is still very new and novel, so it's quite difficult to find people who are comfortable in making the move from where they are currently into something that's so new and innovative and so risky. We all know CVEs get paid very well wherever they are. So why quit and go somewhere else that could potentially fail? It's a difficult challenge to overcome. As a result of this, the cost of CVEs is very high for a startup, especially a startup that doesn't have revenue at the moment. We're still reliant upon public funding. We're still reliant upon government funding and various other aspects. So when we look inside our organization, we're not working on multiple STCs or minor changes or repairs or anything like that. We have a single program, basically. So trying to find CVEs internally without having a conflict of interest in being too close to the design is very difficult. So therefore, we have to look externally as much as we possibly can. We have very high workload as a consequence of the lack of CVEs. And if you imagine, CVEs are also involved in the development of the regulations, the development of the means of compliance, in working within EuroK, within ASTM, within RTCA, within SAE, in developing standards for means and methods of compliance. So it is an extremely high workload compared to a conventional program where you may have AMCs or ACs that have been around for decades. And then, so all of this has led to us looking outside of the EU. So looking at FAA and ANAC DERs, DARs, basically to bring in, to add additional capability to supplement our DOA system. So regulatory updates. So we've all seen the pace at which Part 21 initial airworthiness evolves. So obviously with the recent addition of SMS, and now we also have the security aspects as well coming. When you have a DOA that's undergoing a TC approval at the moment with a complex product, which takes years, not months, quite often the regulation changes. So you have to continuously update your handbook, your processes, your procedures to basically keep in touch with what's happening. On OSD, one of the challenges we had was providing detailed processes on how we would do flight crew, maintenance crew training, because this is such a new and innovative aircraft. The guidance material is not out there yet. CS FCD, CS MCSD is going to be updated to include such guidance, but at the moment we're not there yet. So we have to provide placeholder processes essentially at the moment to demonstrate how we will address these in future. Under Rulemaking Task 230, we have the Opinion 03/2023, which is providing a framework for operating innovative air mobility products within the EU. This will also include further changes to Part 21. And in addition to that, we also have a certification memorandum coming on things like function and reliability testing. Currently, we have 300 hours, but for this type of product, 300 hours may not be appropriate. We can't fly for 5 hours or 6 hours at a time to demonstrate function and reliability. And then aircraft certification basis. So unlike conventional products, where you have CS25, you have the AMCs and everything already established, we still have quite an element of fluidity in what's happening. Means of compliance are not all there yet. The airworthiness code is still a special condition. So all of this kind of adds to some of the complexities in setting up the DOA. And last but not least, we're setting up a DOA and a POA. We're working with the competent authority, the LBR, for the POA side. We're working with the IASA for the DOA side. So first and foremost, in order for the LBA to actually tackle the investigation on the POA with a level of rigor, we need to have a DOA. One of the prerequisites to applying for a POA is having a PO-DO arrangement with an established DOA. If we don't have a DOA approval, chicken and egg. So this is one of the scenarios that we're in at the moment. Although luckily the LBR, the LBA have been reviewing our processes already on the POA side, so things are moving. Conformity is quite important. I mean, normally when you're working with a TC, you rely on your POA basically to do a lot of conformity of your test specimens or your parts essentially. This cannot be done without having a POA. So as a result of that, in order to address 21.8.33b1 and also the J News article 2019-11, we have to set up a production inspection system in accordance with subpart F of part 21, in particular 21.8.126. And that requires additional processes, additional authorization of production personnel under the DOA and various other aspects that we've had to bring in as a result of this. We're getting there, but you can imagine there's quite a lot of workload involved in these items. SMS, which was touched upon earlier on by Eva as well. We're working with the IASA on one side. We're working with the competent authority on the other side, on the POA side, in order to address SMS for both the PMS as well as the DMS. Now, aiming for a single organizational-wide SMS is difficult because the LBA are not there yet. They're not ready to accept something that we're doing for IASA for the DOA side. So this is an additional challenge that we're facing. And then we have additional risk. Now, if you imagine the sequence of activities, we need our DOA first in order to get our TC. We need our TC first in order to fulfill the requirements of the capability list for our POA. We need our POA first in order to provide the aircraft statement of conformity, in order to get a certificate of airworthiness and the noise certificate per subpart H and I. So you can imagine some of the challenges that we're facing as a new organization. Okay, that concludes my presentation. So we can move across to any questions that you may have. Thank you.
So, do we have any questions from the audience or reactions? Yes, okay. So, hello.
Hi.
Is Pavel Fedor from Safran. How do you implement the control for your suppliers? Because this is one of the critical themes of any TC holder and one of the favorite subject of an audit, any other audit.
Yeah, okay. So that is one team that we have, our supply chain quality and our engineering quality, that's actually quite big. As you can imagine, if you look at the number of suppliers that we have, so we're already implementing audits on the suppliers. We have quite a rigorous approval process for suppliers based on their existing authorizations. Either they hold a 9100, 9001, or they hold a DO or PO, or they are a TSOA. So this was one of the processes that we had agreed with the IASA back in 2021 in our initial audit. So we're following that essentially with a level of rigor. And our independent system monitoring function has already started the surveillance on them to ensure that things are happening. So even though we don't have the DOA approval, within that area, we're already working to ensure that they meet the requirements.
Okay, we have another question here.
Hello, Babes.
Hi.
My test, Evan. So I also work in a startup, not for TCs, more system components. And you mentioned that you needed to go to other industries to maybe find CVs or persons that are very experienced.
Mm-hmm.
did you encounter any difficulties with IASA when trying to have those persons appointed as CVEs? Like, we don't know you, we don't know, even if you know a lot, you don't know, we suppose you don't know anything about these systems, so we don't want you here.
Okay, no, great question. So what we agreed, the process we agreed with the IASA is basically the training we gave everyone who came into the organization from external. So we have formal Part 21 training, IASA Part 21 training. We have formal CVE training with a very recognized organization to ensure they get familiarity with the IASA system, how that works. Obviously, we do the assessment of their technical competency as part of bringing them in the first place. So we can already vet whether or not they know the skill set that we're looking for that side. And then once they're in, once they've gone through the formal training, they're also familiar internally with our handbook through our own internal training. So that's the way we kind of adapt them. And that was fine for IASA. We didn't have any issues with that.
Thank you.
We have a couple of questions on Slido as well. So I see that you actually already answered the one on training, I would say. The second one is about the 10 to the -9 safety goal, whether it's related exclusively to design safety or to operations in general.
Yes, it is. So what IASA have done within special condition VTOL for this aircraft, they've actually brought safety objectives into the actual airworthiness code, or special condition as they're calling it. So under VTOL 2510 Alpha, which is a regulation, there is a table that shows if you're creating an enhanced category VTOL aircraft versus a basic category, the enhanced category for DOA and catastrophic failure must meet 10 to the -9. So there's a lot of preamble. In fact, for those of you who can't sleep at night, I would read it. If you look at the preamble in SC VTOL, it explains how certain elements from operations have been brought in and combined with airworthiness criteria to actually have a definitive way forward for safety objectives. So yeah.
Okay, thank you. I would perhaps jump to the Air France question, and then we can go back to the other one afterwards. How do you see the maintenance of your product after entering into service?
It's a great question. So some of the technologies we've introduced are novel. And as a result of that, things like the powertrain, we will have special training requirements for type rating that we'll introduce under the MCSD OSD process, basically. With the exception of that, most of the items are quite conventional. The sort of materials that we're using are aerospace materials. The practices basically that we'll provide within our AMMs and within our instructions for continued airworthiness will be quite similar to a conventional product. So everything will be addressed through OSD at the moment. And we have in-house maintainability teams. We have in-house focals who are licensed engineers from 145 organizations. So we're already considering that as part of the development of the product. I hope that answers your question.
Okay. This one question, I'm not sure. Can you answer it directly, or do we give the mic to the person in the audience, perhaps? So it states, without DOA and POA, how do you manage your prototypes, and more the difference between the inventor company and the future industrial?
Okay. So even though we don't have the DOA yet, we have a level of maturity in our processes which we've had accepted by IASA, basically, for us to continue working as we are. And naturally, if we deviate from that, it is a challenge, and we can't keep track. But everything is under configuration control already. So basically, many elements, since we had our preliminary design review, are under configuration control, as agreed with IASA. But the prototyping itself, we will have a DOA. In fact, we're expecting to have the DOA later on this year. So we haven't actually started production of the prototype aircraft. You may see videos of Lilium aircraft flying around at the moment. And those aircraft are technology demonstrator aircraft that are flying under the SAIL and SORA process, basically, in Spain. So they're not under the DOA, they're not prototypes, they're not conforming aircraft, so to speak. But our start of production, we're expecting to happen after we receive the DOA approval, which is later on this year. So that may also answer the second question there about how many aircraft do you have in production. Unfortunately, 0 at the moment, because we can't. So that's kind of where we are at the moment.